Hey everyone, Erica with K here. Today's video is going to be on sewing tips that I wish I knew before I started sewing. So just a little background on myself. I am a self-taught sewist. I just got into using the sewing machine about 2 years ago when I got my mastectomy done. During my healing, I was like, I really want to learn how to do the sewing machine, and I didn't know how to thread it. So my husband did it for me, but I've been hand sewing since like the 90s. I've been hand sewing for as long as I could remember. Again, self-taught. I'm not the best at hand sewing, but I'm pretty good at looking at fabric and changing it into something else, or like looking at an article of clothes and making it into something else. And that's why I have an entire series called Manipulating Fabric, because I'm pretty good at manipulating fabric. Learning how to sew is pretty simple. The hardest thing for me is learning how to thread the machine, because I'm really terrible at following instructions, but I'm really good with just like going off the cuff, like doing what I feel like doing. So I kind of wanted to give a little bit of a backstory, and I'm going to have a timestamp down below in case you want to fast forward and get right to the tips. I totally understand. I do have ADHD and I do tend to ramble. So I do want to give a little bit of backstory. Ever since I was young and the movie Clueless came out, I'm going to guess that was around like 96. I would have been about 10 years old. I remember being so in love with the crop tops. And of course, crop tops weren't around in like 96 that like I remember, or at least my age, if I was 10, it wouldn't have been like available to me. And so I remember cutting the bottoms of a lot of my tops after like, or like while watching the movie and thinking like, I'm gonna do that. And that was when I first started getting into like making my own stuff. I never like went for, like what I do today is way further than what I ever did as a kid. And I also was not successful at the things that I've done. Then when I started like developing, I developed pretty young too, probably also in the early 90s, late to early 90s. I used to get Maidenform. I think they were Maidenform bras, and it was, you buy a bra and then you mail in the little thing. If anybody remembers this, please let me know. And you get a bra mailed back to you. But at the time they only had these bras that were like, there was no padding in them. There was no lining in them. They were almost like a bralette. Those are the bras that I grew up wearing because we always did the buy one, get one basically. And I remember wearing a tank top, like, you know, a really skinny, like spaghetti strap. And I remember specifically being on vacation for this. And I was like, I need something to, so you can't see my bra strap. Like it was annoying. And I wore like a white bra and I had like a dark green, like tank top on. And I was like, I need something that like, you won't be able to see my bra strap. And I was like, I can just cut this and make this like a strapless. I didn't even know what a strapless was because the only bra experience I had was these Maidenform ones that were literally like low grade bras. Like they weren't anything special. I don't know if the quality was low grade, but like I would never buy that today. Like it just, especially with how my boobs were, like it just wasn't appropriate for them. So anyway, I wound up cutting because I was like, I'm gonna make these into strapless, even though I didn't know what a strapless was. I just knew I didn't want to see the strap, and that didn't work. It would just fall down. The whole thing would fall. And I remember being on vacation and it was just like down. It didn't support me. At that point, it would have made more sense not to wear a bra, but I would never at that time not wear a bra. But anyway, so I never was like super successful in my attempts to alter my own clothes, but that was just something that I really enjoyed doing. I received a sewing machine when I was from the age maybe 15 to 17 from my best friend's mom. And that is a sewing machine I have today and I use. I am 38 now and I just started using it 2 years ago. So I have it for about 20 years unused. And I just started using it when my husband looked up the directions on how to thread it because I didn't know how to do that. And so that brings me to my first point, and that is, if you know how to thread a machine, you know how to sew. Sewing is all about creativity, in my opinion. So is everything I do, right? Like I remember when I used to do hair full time when I owned a salon, I would say like, I work with your hair. I feel your hair. Yeah, I know the fundamentals of hair and I know the fundamentals of makeup, but I work with what I have. And I feel the same exact way towards sewing. Like I don't use patterns. I don't use printouts and then like follow something. I just go based on like what I'm feeling in that moment and like where the fabric's telling me to go. And that's just how I operate in life. And so I know that this might not be for everybody, but it does work for me. And so in saying that, my whole point is like, there are no mistakes. And if you do make a mistake, you can just take that thread out and resew it. So if you know how to thread a machine, you know how to sew, go for it and you'll learn along the way. And this video is going to give you some tips of things that I've learned as I've just been going with it. Something that I just recently learned is that you should always start and end with a back stitch. So a back stitch, I think knots it. I'm not even positive, but in my opinion, it helps the thread to, if the thread unravels, it'll stop at that back stitch. So I'm thinking it kind of knots it, and I think that's the point of the back stitch. But I always put it in, do a little stitch, and then do a back stitch, and then go all the way. And then when I'm done with that thing, I'll do another back stitch at the end just to end it. And in my opinion, I've noticed that when the thread does get caught up, or if the thread does break, it does stop at that back stitch. So you want to start and end with it to make sure you don't have like a wardrobe malfunction, and to make sure that your article of clothing is sturdy. Taking clothes in is way easier than making clothes bigger, or taking the stitching out and making it larger, adding material. That is way harder and takes way more skill than taking clothes in. Not having boobs is so easy. I had a prophylactic bilateral mastectomy because I was high risk for breast cancer. And before that I had 32 double F boobs, and I couldn't have dreamed of being able to create clothes around my huge ever-growing boobs. That would have been very difficult for me. But being that I'm flat and sometimes will wear a little bit of padding if I feel like it, but most times I don't, it is so easy to take clothes in. And so I just want to say that, so that in case you're watching this and you're like, my boobs are just like out of control, it's hard to find something that supports them, I could never sew. I get it. I get it. You're not alone, and I'm not here to gaslight you. I totally understand that it is very difficult to sew around huge mountains that are on you. That is a hard thing to do. Always go a little bit larger than what you think you need. I tend to always go a little bit smaller, and then I'm like struggling to get it on, and I need my husband's help, and it's just a little problematic unless you're using like a stretchy material. What is this hair doing? Unless you're using like a stretchy material that has a little bit of give. If you're not, you'll break those threads. Might not be able to get it on. You might have to add a zipper, and it just overcomplicates everything. So you can always make it smaller. That's so easy. You just go in a little bit more on the hem on the sides. But making it larger once you've already threaded it, or once you've already, sewn it, is definitely more difficult. So always give yourself a little bit of extra room than what you think you'll need. From my opinion, I messed that up almost like 9 times out of 10. Save all your fabric and all your clothing and all of your threads, and keep it in a scrap pile. I have like a little, it's pretty big, like an orange bin. It has all my scraps in it. It has all like the threads, when like you cut the threads at the end of sewing, or even like a thread that maybe didn't make it all the way through. I keep all those in little jars. I keep every like little bit. If it's very, very small piece, like this big, I'll keep it. Maybe I'll use it for stuffing. Sometimes I use those threads that I cut at the end, like, when you pull it out of a machine and you cut it. Sometimes when I cut those off of the fabric, I'll put those aside. And if I need to just do a quick little stitch, I'll just thread a needle with it and I'll just sew it. And it just helps me not have to waste so much stuff all the time. Sorry, the lighting just changed. I don't know why that happened, but it did. So I save everything. Save all your clothes. If you're like, oh, I love this fabric, but I just don't like the way it looks on me, save it, because you might find something to do with it in the future. And if it's good quality, you're going to want to hold on to that. Fabric can be pretty costly. To be honest, I've never purchased fabric. Everything that I've ever done was from another article of clothing that I've turned into something else. I've never actually went out and like purchased fabric. But when I do online shop, window shop online, I do notice that it's quite pricey. It's per yard, and yard is like 3 feet, and that doesn't really get you too far. So always save your fabrics. You never know when you're going to use it in the future. If you don't like the fabric, if you're like, it's an itchy material or it's see-through, you might want to use it for a different craft. Like you might just want to use it for something not clothing related, maybe an accessory, maybe a decoration. So just hold on to your scraps as long as they don't become too consuming. You don't need things that are weighing you down. But if you have good quality things, or you're like, I really love this, I just don't like this one particular thing about it, and I'm not sure how I could fix that, so I'm going to get rid of it, hold on to it. You might figure out how to fix it in the future. You might accidentally stumble upon a way to fix it. You might think of a different idea for it. So holding on to fabric, I think, is one of the most important things. That is, all my sewing videos has been from holding on to fabric. And like I said, I've never purchased it. So anything you see in my videos is just outfits that I had that I turned into something else. So I think saving all fabric, saving all clothes is really important, unless it's something that's like ethically not made and you just don't want to support that. I support that. Go check out my giveaway, by the way, if you're here. It is still going on if you're watching this video anytime before the end of April 2025. You can still enter, and I'm giving away mystery boxes full of clothes. Or if you're not my size, it's like a small, extra small, maybe a little bit of mediums. If you're not that size, or if you don't want to use this as like a scrap pile, or if you don't want to use it as things that you want to turn into other things, I'm also giving away hangers. I'll have that video linked over here, I think. This one I learned, and it's my favorite hack, especially if you're somebody like me and you have ADHD and certain things just get you. So you know how if you're gonna do a sleeve, you would remove the whole entire sleeve, you would make this smaller or larger or whatever you wanted, you do the same alteration to the shirt, and then you'd sew the sleeve back on. Well, if you don't do that, and you just do like a candy cane shape, I like to say, or like an L shape, and you just sew like this in wherever you need it, it's going to give you a sleeve exactly like this. It's going to give you this kind of look, which is perfect for me because I don't have anything going on up here. And so instead of it being tight here, and then you could see my ribs, instead of that, it just gives me like a little bit of a domain sleeve. I think that's what they're called. They're like a small bat wing. And so that's my favorite way to take in clothes whenever I'm doing like a sleeve and a shirt alteration and I'm bringing it in. My favorite thing is just to pin it here, 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 and just go whoop, right up without removing the sleeve. And that'll give you, I think it's called a domain sleeve. I'm going to have it written on the screen because my pronunciation is not my strong suit. I promise. Anything that you need precision for, like accuracy that doesn't take creativity, like math or like pronunciation, I can't. I fail terribly at it because I'm just not that kind of gal. It doesn't have to be perfect is my next one on my list. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can take out a stitch if you need to. You can be like, yeah, this is handmade. I have one of my couch sample videos where I got a bunch of couch samples in because we were looking to buy a new couch. This is the new one that we actually want. I'm going with. I got a bunch of couch samples in and I sewed it together. And when I went apple picking with it, the lady at the front was like, is that shirt handmade? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, I love your shirt. And then I got numerous compliments from other people who were like, I love your handmade shirt. And some people might be insulted and be like, how do they know it's handmade? I love it. I'm like, yeah, I made this. Like, I made this. This was me. And so it doesn't have to be perfect. And I think part of the perk of it being handmade is people knowing that it's handmade. I think it would be cool if I really nailed it too, and people thought that I bought it and it was expensive, but like that's a dream for somebody else, probably not for me. So it doesn't have to be perfect. It's handmade. You can re-alter it. You can change it. You can change directions completely. You can cut out the thread. You can do whatever you want. Get a seam ripper. I always forget what they're called. Somebody had to write that on one of my videos because I couldn't remember what it's called. Get a seam ripper and you can rip the seam out, even the one you just made, and just redo it. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. This is about creativity and art, and that's not perfect. Make sure the sewing needle is up before you try to take out your fabric from the sewing machine. If you don't do this, you won't be able to pull your fabric out, and you could also break that needle that's in the sewing machine, and that's just annoying to have to replace. So just make sure that there's like a little latch that you hit. I'll have it in this video to make sure that that needle is up, and to also make sure that, well, there's actually a dial on mine that will make sure that the needle's up, and then you actually have to hit that little switch and it'll bring that whole mechanism up. You want to make sure that both of those are up whenever you're taking out a piece of fabric. That also will help if there's a jam, because sometimes when you don't take out that needle, or if it's like mid about to go thread, it'll jam it up if you take out the fabric at that time. So you just want to make sure that needle is always up, and also the other whole like mechanism thing. Probably why, if there is a jam, that's probably what's jamming up your machine. Don't try to sew sticky Velcro. I don't know if this is going to be one of those unpopular opinion, but don't try to sew sticky Velcro. It ruined. First of all, my machine won't go through it. I don't know if I just don't have the best machine for this kind of thing, but my machine wouldn't go through it, so it kept jamming it up. That happens sometimes. If the material is very thick, it'll jam it. And also if it's sticky, because the stickiness is just getting everywhere. But then I went in and I hand sewed the Velcro, the sticky Velcro on, and it ruined the needle. The needle is now sticky, and I can clean it. Will I? Probably not. But it will get like a sticky residue on everything. You should just trust the process that the stickiness is going to stick, and just go with it. You don't have to try to sew that. I already said that when mistakes happen, a seam ripper is your friend. If you do multiples of something, complete the first one first before you go on to creating a second and a third. I'm somebody who's very much, when I'm in the zone, I'm in the zone. And I would be like, all right, at this point, I'm going to do all of this side of every article of clothes. And then I'm going to do all of this of every article of clothes. And what I've noticed is I pick up on my mistakes along the way. But if I've already done a third of each one, I repeated that same mistake throughout. I'm not going to realize until I get to the next part that I made a mistake on that first part. And if I already was doing multiples of it, I'm either going to have to go back in with a seam ripper or rework everything. And I noticed this big time with my air conditioner covers. I'll leave that video linked. There's really not much sewing in it, but I basically did each step on each one first. And by the end, I was like, that was silly because I picked up on my mistakes along the way. And I realized that I should have just made one and had a prototype for it. Last time I was trying to say prototype in a video, I kept calling it a protocol. Anyway, I realized like if I just had a prototype, I could have just followed that for the rest of them. And I think following directions is a problem for me. I know it is. That's like my ADHD. Following silly directions. If they're serious directions, I will follow them more than anybody. But if I perceive them as silly, I will not want to do it. And when it comes to creativity, I perceive it as silly. And so following even my own directions, if I perceive it as silly, I'm not going to want to do it. So I would do like whatever I wanted to do at that time. But what I should have done was finish the first one, make sure I knew what I was doing, figure out all the kinks, work them all out, and then go on to the next. So with sewing, you really want to do that. You want to make sure that you get it right the first time before you start making multiple of something. Learn from your mistakes and carry on. I mentioned saving the thread so you could hand sew if you need to, like when you cut off. Okay, use safety pins when you try on the articles of clothes. I find this so much better than using those push pins that go in. I think they're called push pins, the little pins that have like the little ball at the end, because I try everything on my body. There is no mannequin that doesn't have boobs that has my body type. I'm 5'3", I'm like 108 pounds, and I don't have boobs. Like there's no dress form that has that body. And so I have to use my own body for my measurements. And so what I do is I put the article of clothes on inside out, and then you've seen it definitely in my videos, and then I just pin around. But I use safety pins because guess what? This article of clothing has to come off my head, and I'm not going to poke myself with some loose end pins or worry about them even coming out. But really poking myself is my biggest fear. So if you use some safety pins, you can close them, and then you can just carry on and fix your alterations as you need to go. They might not be pinned perfectly because you're doing it on yourself, but you can just fix those pins when you have the article of clothing off of you. You have a general idea of where everything goes, but make sure that you use pins. Also, I think this goes more with the making sure that you give yourself a little bit of extra room. I've been sewing on the inside of my pin marks. You really should be sewing on the outside. And by pin, I mean safety pin. On the outside of your pin marks, you can always go in later and make it smaller if you need to. But again, it's really way more difficult to make an article of clothing looser if you need to. So when you do put those pins in to get it to whatever shape, make sure that you sew on the outside of those pins, not on the inside of those pins, because that's just going to make the clothing smaller. Things need to be bigger than you think they need to be. I promise you that. If the thread keeps jamming up on something, like I said, like through a Velcro or through something that's like a hard material, a thick material, start off slow. I think what happens I think it's called a bobbin, the top piece of thread, like that top thread. Sometimes if you go too fast through a hard material, it'll just like whip around and fall off, and the whole string will mess up. The whole thread will mess up. But if you go very slow with the foot pedal, I always thought the foot pedal was optional until I started actually using the sewing machine. I didn't know that's what operated the whole thing, but the foot pedal operates the entire machine. But anyway, just found that out 2 years ago. So you're gonna put your foot slowly on it, like you're at a yield sign. You're just slowly rolling through that yield sign to make sure everything's okay. And then as you see the thread go through, do your back stitch, come a little bit further, make sure it's good, and then you can go and actually press on that gas and merge. Think about it as like a yield sign. That is such a huge tip if you don't want your thread messing up while you're going through like a tough, difficult fabric. Okay, I don't know if this is on all machines. I only have experience with my own sewing machine, but there is a bottom piece that comes out. If you turn it down, there's like a little storage area, but you could pull that whole piece out, and that's that piece where you get to where that little bobbin is on the bottom. That's like the bane of my existence, and I don't understand it, and my husband has to use that. Anyway, if you take out that whole area, that whole section, just say you're working on like a small bag or something that has a small opening that you have to sew in, it makes it so much easier to take out that area because there's no more restriction. How do I say? There's no more restriction on the bag to like, that you can't get your bag through there. Like if there's like a small opening in your bag, I'm gonna have this in the video so it makes more sense. And I guess the final thing that I'll say is that your dream wardrobe is in your closet already. Just go create. And my last message I want to leave you with for 2025 is just to consume less and create more. I love you guys so much, and I hope that I serve as inspiration for people who just want to wing it and just want to have fun and be creative and not be bogged down by the logistics of something. I save that for my husband, and I get to create and I get to dream. And he does too. He's super creative, but so many of our minds work differently. And my mind is just very flighty. So I hope that this video helps if you're someone like me and you're just getting in this to have fun and be, unique and show your unique style. Yeah, just have a day with it. I'm sure there are other things that I could think of. But if you have any that you want to leave down below, like if you're a sewist, if you've been sewing for a long time and things that maybe you're just finding out or things that were very important when you first started sewing out, please leave them down below. Even if you're a brand new sewist and you're like, I just learned this the other day and this changed everything, please leave your tips down below. Let this be like a fun little area of like where people can leave tips and tricks and stuff like that. If you don't have any tips or tricks, leave down below which one in this video was your favorite to learn, something that maybe you didn't know. Okay, I love you guys so much. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye.